Chairman Blumenthal, Ranking Member Hawley, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Curtis Leggett, and I'm the President and CEO of the National Association of Broadcasters. I'm proud to testify today on behalf of our thousands of local television and radio station members who serve your constituents every day. Study after study shows that local broadcasters are the most trusted source of news and information. Our investigative reports have received countless awards for exemplifying the importance and impact of journalism as a service to the community. This includes WTNH News 8 in New Haven, which received an Edward R. Murrow Award for its reporting on child sex trafficking in the state, and KMX Radio and KMOV TV in St. Louis, which were also recently honored with Murrow Awards for their accurate and heartfelt reporting of a deadly school shooting. Stories like these are the antidote to the misinformation and disinformation that thrives online. Broadcasters will build on this trust by embracing new AI tools that will help our journalists, particularly when it comes to delivering breaking news and emergency information. For example, one broadcaster is piloting a tool that will use AI to quickly cull through inbound tips from email and social media to produce recommendations that they can verify and turn into impactful stories. Other broadcasters are using AI to translate their stories into other languages to better serve diverse audiences. When AI can help these journalists, real people, perform their jobs in their communities, we welcome it. However, this subcommittee should be mindful of three significant risks that generative AI poses to broadcast newsrooms across the country. First, the use of broadcasters' news content and AI models without authorization diminishes our audience trust and our reinvestment in local news. Broadcasters have already seen numerous examples where content created by our journalists has been ingested and regurgitated by AI bots with little or no attribution. For example, when a well-known AI platform was recently prompted to provide the latest news in Parkersburg, West Virginia, it generated outputs copied nearly word for word from WTAP-TV's website. The station did not grant permission for that use, nor were they even made aware of it. Not only are broadcasters losing out on that compensation, but this unauthorized usage risks undermining trust as stations lose control over how their content is used and whether it's integrated with other unverified information. All of the concerns that drive Senator Klobuchar, Kennedy, and this committee's work on the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act are exacerbated by the emergence of generative AI. Second, the use of AI to doctor, manipulate, or misappropriate the likeness of trusted radio or television personalities risks spreading misinformation or even perpetuating fraud. One example, a recent video clip of a routine discussion between two broadcast TV anchors was manipulated to create a hateful, racist, anti-Semitic rant. And Univision's Jorge Ramos, one of the most respected figures in American journalism, has repeatedly been a victim of AI tools, appropriating and manipulating his voice and image to advertise all kinds of unauthorized goods and services. We appreciate the attention of Senators Coons, Blackburn, Klobuchar, and Tillis to this growing and significant problem, which should be addressed in balance with the First Amendment. Finally, the rising prevalence of deepfakes makes it increasingly burdensome for both our newsrooms and users to identify and distinguish legitimate copyrighted broadcast content from the unvetted and potentially inaccurate content being generated by AI. To give a recent illustration, following the recent October 7th terrorist attacks on Israel, fake photos and videos reached an unprecedented level on social media in a matter of minutes. Of the thousands of videos that one broadcast network sifted through to report on the attacks, only 10% of them were authentic and usable. As I document in my written testimony, broadcasters across the country have launched significant new initiatives to bolster the vetting process of the content that is aired on our stations. But these efforts are costly, and the problem grows more complex by the day. In conclusion, America's broadcasters are extremely proud of the role we play in serving your constituents, and we are eager to embrace AI when it can be harnessed to enhance that critical role. However, as we have seen in the cautionary tale of big tech, exploitation of new technologies can undermine local news. This subcommittee is wise to keep a close eye on AI, as well as the way our current laws are applied to it. Thank you again for inviting me to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Mr. Lynch. Thank you, Chair Blumenthal, Ranking Member Hawley, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate today in the critical discussion about AI and the future of journalism. My name is Roger Lynch, and I'm the CEO of Condé Nast. Condé Nast's iconic brands and publications include The New Yorker, Vogue, Vanity Fair, Wired, Architectural Digest, Condé Nast Traveler, GQ, Bon Appetit, and many more, including, I might add, Tatler, which was first published in the UK in 1709. Our mission is to produce culture-defining, exceptional journalism and creative content. And this purpose is evident in our output that only humans can make, together with rigorous standards and fact-checking that can be produced. The result is stories that change society for the better, information that helps people make decisions in their daily lives, and content that creates an informed and empowered electorate. As an example, this is what The New Yorker has done for over 100 years, from the publishing of John Hersey's 1946 account of the survivors of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, to the serialized chapters of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which helped launch the modern environmental movement in 1962, to more recently Patrick Radden Keefe's exposés on the Sackler family's ruthless marketing of OxyContin, the drug that profited billions from people's addictions. I have long experience leading companies through times of great technological change. You could say it's in my DNA. And generative AI is certainly bringing about such change and is already demonstrating tremendous potential to make the world a better place. But Gen AI cannot replace journalism. Journalism is fundamentally a human pursuit, and it plays an essential and irreplaceable role in our society and our democracy. It takes reporters with grit, integrity, ambition, and human creativity to develop the stories that allow free markets, free speech, and freedom itself to thrive. In each business that I've led, successful new businesses were built on a foundation of licensing content rights. Licensing allowed distributors to work together with content creators to innovate new and better consumer experiences and generate profits that were invested in creating more great content. I'm here today because congressional intervention is needed to make clear that Gen AI companies must also take licenses to utilize publisher content for use with Gen AI. Unfortunately, currently deployed Gen AI tools have been built with stolen goods. Gen AI companies copy and display our content without permission or compensation in order to build massive commercial businesses that directly compete with us. Big tech companies argue that this is fair use, that their machines are just learning from reading our content just as humans learn, and that no licenses are required for that. This is a false analogy. Gen AI models do not learn like humans do. They maintain complete copies of the works they train on, our content, and output its substance while keeping 100% of the value for themselves and training consumers to come to them for information, not to us, depriving us of essential customer relationships. Fair use is designed to allow criticism, parody, scholarship, research, and news reporting. The law is clear that it is not fair use when there is an adverse effect on the market for the copyrighted material. It is that market that creates the incentive to invest and innovate in content. And in that way, the market supports journalism and innovation in the long run. Fair use is not intended to simply enrich technology companies that prefer not to pay. Moreover, Gen AI technology enables misinformation on an unprecedented scale. In the wrong hands, Gen AI can generate outputs that are customized for individuals, making misinformation in all forms, fake photographs, audio, video, and documents, look real. Widely available Gen AI tools hallucinate and generate misstatements that are sometimes attributed to real publications like ours, damaging our brands. Americans can't possibly spend all of their time determining what's true and what's false. Instead, they may stop trusting any source of information with devastating consequences. Luckily, there is a path forward that's good policy, it's good business, and it's already the law. Licensed and compensated use of publisher content for both training and output. This will ensure a sustainable ecosystem in which high-quality content continues to be produced by brands consumers trust. This will also ensure that information comes from many sources without big tech companies as gatekeepers. Licensing will support a sustainable future. In conclusion, we urge Congress to take immediate action to clarify that the use of publisher content for both Gen AI training and output must be licensed and compensated. The time to act is now, and the stakes are nothing short of the continued viability of journalism. Thank you very much for your work on these important issues.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lynch. And let me begin where you ended to say that what we're proposing really is to clarify. The argument could be made, I think, that the law now requires this kind of licensing, but I think you would agree with me that the costs of enforcing those rights through litigation, the financial costs, the delay, the costs in time, make it often a impractical or less effective remedy than is needed and deserved. Is that the thrust of your testimony?
Yes, Senator. If the big AI companies had agreed with that position, we would be able to negotiate arrangements with them. Unfortunately, they do not agree with that. They do not agree that they should have to be paying for this. So they believe that it is covered under fair use, and hence the lawsuits that you've already seen starting.
In a blog post, I believe, from OpenAI, reported very recently, within the last 24 hours or so, the reference was made, in fact, to ongoing negotiations preceding the New York Times lawsuit, and possibly other negotiations are ongoing. But in the long term, those kinds of individual ad hoc agreements will be unavailing to the smaller newspapers or broadcast stations that don't have the resources of a New York Times, correct?
Certainly, that would be a major concern, is that the amount of time it would take to litigate, appeal, go back to the courts, appeal, maybe ultimately make it to the Supreme Court to settle. Between now and then, there'd be many, many companies, media companies, that would go out of business.
One of the core principles of the framework that Senator Hawley and I have proposed is record keeping and transparency. Developers ought to be required to disclose essential information about the training, data, and safety of AI models to users and other companies. Ms. Coffey, you make the point that this is important for newspapers. The AI companies have been intensely secretive about where they get their data, but we know, based on even the limited transparency that's available to us, that they use copyright material, and it's the bedrock for many of their models. For example, Meta and other companies use a database called Books3, which is a collection of nearly 200,000 pirated books. That's not public information, that's theft, in my view. I'm a former prosecutor, so I don't use that term lightly, but it seems to me that's the right term for it. So part of the problem is that AI companies are using this hard work, not just the sweat and tears and sometimes blood, but also the financial investment that is made to produce news. It doesn't appear magically. It's not out of thin air. It's an investment. And the kind of lack of transparency makes it harder for you to protect your rights. Is that correct?
That is correct, and we found the same thing with news media. 5 of the top 10 sites that are used by C4, which is the curated, more responsible data set that train the models of Common Crawl. We found that 5 of the top 10 were news media sites because it is quality, it is reliable, it is vetted and fact-based. And then we would agree that licensing would be the best marketplace solution so that we can avoid protracted litigation. And in order to do that, we need to know how they're using our content. So So a searchable database would be something that we would recommend. There are other options and ways to do that, and I know that there's legislation that we're supportive of that would identify how our content is being used, because any sort of tagging that we do, any authentication, we work with Adobe and others, but it's stripped whenever they take our content, and it doesn't follow the content through to the output, so we don't know how our content is actually being used, and therefore we can't enforce, and it's difficult to negotiate if we don't have that information. There's different versions that might work, but we would be very supportive of that so that we can enforce our rights.
I would be very interested in more specifics from all the witnesses. We may not have time today to explore all the technical details, but obviously those details are important. I just want to emphasize the point that I think really all of you have made, which is there's great promise. There are tremendous potential benefits to using AI, for example, in investigative reporting, to go through court files or documents, discovery, depositions, all kinds of stuff that can be more effectively and efficiently explored and summarized by AI, but we also need to be mindful of the perils. We're going to have 5-minute rounds of questions, and I'll turn to the ranking member, Senator Hawley, now.
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here. Mr. Lynch, if I could just come back to you, because I was struck by your comment that the problem with generative AI as it exists currently, it's been built with stolen goods. Let's just talk a little bit about the sort of content licensing framework that you would favor. Can you give us a sort of a sketch of what that would look like, something that protects existing copyright law, something that you think would be workable? I'm not asking you to write the statute for us,
Sure,
but just
sure.
maybe give us a thumbnail overview.
I think quite simply, if Congress could clarify that the use of our content and other publisher content for training and output of AI models is not fair use, then the free market will take care of the rest. Just like it has in the music industry where I worked, in film and television, sports rights, it can enable private negotiations. And, in the music industry where you think about millions of artists, millions of ultimate consumers consuming that content, there have been models that have been set up, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, GMR, these collective rights organizations, to simplify the licensing of that content. And the nice thing about that is it doesn't take a company the size of Condé Nast or the New York Times to create these licensing deals. These organizations can do it for all content producers. So, fundamentally, we think a simple fix or clarification that use of content for training and output of AI models is not fair use. The market will take care of the rest.
I have to say that seems eminently sensible to me, and it leads me to ask the question, why shouldn't we expand that regime outward? Why shouldn't we say that anybody whose data is ingested and then regurgitated by generative AI, whether that's their name, their image, their likeness, why shouldn't they be able also to have a right to compensation? Our copyright laws are quite broad, I think justly so. So, why shouldn't, I'm very sympathetic to this argument for journalists and content creators for whom content creation is a career. But there are lots of other folks for whom it's not a career, but they create things, they have work product, they post things online. Why shouldn't they also be protected? It seems to me that they should. It seems to me that every American ought to have some rights here in their data and in their content. And the sort of regime you've described, these are ordinary Americans already protected by copyright law. It seems that we should find a way to enforce that. And the way that you've described in terms of clarifying fair use seems to me to be a potential path forward. Mr. Leggett, let me shift gears and ask you about something that you said. It's in your written testimony, and you mentioned it too just a moment ago about this video clip, one of many, unfortunately, with the broadcast TV anchors that was manipulated, and we've seen this is proliferating. The New York Times did a report just a couple of days ago about similar manipulation of images. In this case, not news reporters. This was just the Times reported on, for instance, I think a doctor. Online trolls, I'm quoting from the report now, took screenshots of a doctor from an online feed of her testimony she was giving at a parole board hearing and edited the images with AI tools, in that case, to make them sexually explicit, completely fake. And this is the classic deep fake, but obviously extremely harmful, extremely invasive. and then posted them online. I mean, used these images, created these images, and then in this case put them on 4chan. So my question to you is, shouldn't there be some sort of federal limit, federal ban on deepfake images? Certainly of a sexually explicit nature, but shouldn't every American have the right to think, with appropriate First Amendment exceptions for parody, but shouldn't we have the right to think that, listen, you're not just going to, if you put a picture on Instagram of your child, it's not going to be scraped up by somebody, some company or some individual using company software to generate a sexually explicit image, or in the case of these news anchors, to put literally words in their mouth.
You are absolutely right to prioritize this issue. For local broadcasters, all our local personalities have is the trust of their audiences. And the second that is undermined by disinformation and these technologies, these deep fakes are going to put all of that on steroids, it is just more noise. And I think we have seen the steady decline in our public discourse as a result of the fact that the public can't separate fact from fiction. So absolutely, this is an area that demands your attention, this committee's attention. There are certainly some elements of this that in the expressive context that the committee needs to be mindful of. Certainly, we've aligned ourselves with the Motion Picture Association, and in the creative context, some of the potential carve-outs that they have flagged. But this is an issue that is existential for local news. It's existential for our democracy. And so we absolutely support this committee's attention to it.
And I would just say in closing, Mr. Chairman, to your point, Mr. Leggett, the reason that the public can't separate fact from fiction is in the case of these images. I mean, they look like the real thing. I mean, they're just indistinguishable. I mean, it's not a matter of, the public, they're not paying attention. They are paying attention. That's the problem, is that they look absolutely real. And whether you're a broadcaster or a doctor or a mom or whatever, I just think the idea that at any moment you live in the fear that some image of me out there could be manipulated and turned into something completely else, ruin my reputation. And what's your alternative? Go file a legal suit and fight that out. And I mean, most people don't have money for that. This just seems to me, Mr. Chairman, like a situation we've got to address, and quickly. Thank you.